I want to talk about the look and how you started to develop what this look would be, because you know it's a period piece. It's in Chicago. There's a lot to go here, and you have a lot of like visual examples because this is something that actually took place. This is real life. So you have real examples of what it actually did look like. So can you walk me through how you developed the look for this film?
Well, when I first met with Shaka King, the director, he brought with him not only this vast knowledge of the era and specifically of the subject, but he also had about 300 photographs from that era as well in Chicago through the 60s. And they were a combination of black and white and color. And they kind of became the initial touchstone as to the look of the film. Most of them were black and white and incredibly evocative and incredibly powerful. And at one point I'd said, well, maybe we should shoot the film in black and white. And he was quite adamant that was not going to happen. You know,
why though? Like, what was it about color that he really wanted?
Well, there's a liveliness, but it's also, you know, when you change something, when you present something like that, you know, as the director, he has to take it to the producers in the studio.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's a battle that, unless you really, really are committed to it, it's a battle that's just going to eat up all your time and effort.
Yeah.
And it, you know, in his mind, it was never black and white. And that's the most important thing. You know, because when you looked at the photographs and the color photographs, you know, they're all ectochrome and Kodachrome of that era. And there's a very specific look they have. They're very high contrast, very strong, dark tones in them, but also, you know, very poppy colors, you know, which is what the Kodachrome and ectochrome are famous for. And, you know, these people, the Panthers, they were young. They were 18 to 21 years old. They were vibrant. They were lively people. They were passionate. They were committed.
Yeah.
And part of that liveliness we wanted to show in the color as well, and the world we lived in. Also, the 60s, you know, it wasn't a black and white world. It was, you know, psychedelia and everything else going on. And it does have a very specific palette. And although, you know, this isn't a documentary and it's not a docudrama, and we weren't attempting to create an absolute facsimile of that world, what we wanted to do in the design and the color was to hark back to an era. And you know, Chicago in the 1960s was shown to us in those photographs. So we took a lot of the ideas out of those photographs. And, you know, Sam Lisinka, the designer, had been on a lot longer than I had and had seen the photographs as well and was adding his own photographs to it. And, you know, he's a great designer and had an incredible knowledge of just about everything cultural to do with the 60s. And so through discussions with Shaka, with Sam, and also looking at the locations, we shot in Cleveland because basically we couldn't afford Chicago. And sadly, there's a lot of Cleveland that still looks like Chicago in the 1960s. You know, after the riots there in '69, there were sections of the town that were basically left. So, you know, that area where the Panthers headquarters was hadn't changed since the '60s. It was really quite amazing. And so we embraced, I mean, these are gifts, I mean, amazing gifts to a filmmaker. So we embraced those gifts. And also as we
Did you know you were going to be filming in Cleveland from the beginning, or did you try to shoot Chicago and it just didn't turn out?
No, it was purely cost. You know, Chicago is a very expensive city to film in. Originally they had looked at, I believe, Pittsburgh, but there are hills. You know, Chicago didn't have hills.
Exactly.
And Cleveland's incredibly cheap. I mean, there is no film industry there as such. Locations are cheap to hire. It fit within the budget we had. It's not a big budget film.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it worked because of the landscape that still exists there, sadly, because of the decades and decades of industrial decline. But as we were going through the locations, there was a color that kept appearing, a green. And usually green is not something that you put a lot into a film.
Yeah.
But it became so evocative of that era. And we kept finding it all over the place. So it was something that was incorporated and became a sort of a major point in terms of the color palette of the film.
So you were just finding green naturally at the locations. This isn't something that you were painting on.
No, I mean, a lot of the locations were painted, but once we found this green, it was something that we embraced. And it primarily in the Black Panthers headquarters upstairs in the classroom and the hallways there. But then it occurred quite naturally in the interrogation room at the beginning of the film with O'Neill, and also in the church where Fred Hampton gives his great speech after he's released from prison. So it was something that we embraced. And it became, a very strong and powerful part of the palette.
What I like about green, just as a color choice in film, is that I feel like it seems to have more range than any other of the primary colors, because you can have like a really sickly, scary, awful green, and you can have a very happy, friendly, light green. And I think that it has such a spectrum of emotion that it can give you. I think it's a really good color choice. But that said, it's challenging because it can be so many things. And it's so potent as a color when you're looking at it. I mean, did you ever have situations when filming when you were kind of like, oof, maybe we pushed green a little too hard, or it was too much of it, it was distracting? Did it ever feel like that when you were filming and you had to make some decisions to counteract it?
No. Once you embrace something like that, then it's there. You just have to run with it. And it also, it contrasted so beautifully with the warmer tones. But also, it does, when you put darker flesh tones in front of it, it's very complementary to the darker flesh tones as well. So it was something that we really found worked to our advantage in many ways. And it also gives it a very different feel, because rarely do you have green predominant in a period piece.